Hi, this is Pastor Dave. Welcome back to another message. This will be message number 3 in our series on the Jewish feasts. Today we're going to talk about both unleavened bread and firstfruits.
Okay, let's read Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1. It says, "For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven." I wasn't planning on sleeping for 45 minutes, and that's it last night. But that's how it happened. And I'm honestly not really sure how I'm awake right now. But he knows what he's doing. And he had me run into the right people at the right place in the right time. One of the paramedics that was in the ER when I got there was Carrie Lindquist's father-in-law. I walk into ECMC into the emergency room. "Hey, Al, how's it going?" Like, I know everybody there. So you just don't know what he's doing or where or when, but he knows exactly what he's doing, and there is a time. Now, we've been talking for a couple weeks about biblical feasts, and these really highlight the fact that he has times and seasons and specific things in order, and part of the reason is so that our mindset is on him, and that we have an awareness that he does have a plan, and he actually has a specific timeline he's playing out. And sometimes he gives us a bit of a clue as to what he's doing and when, what season we're in, if we're willing to pay attention and know what's going on, right? So we talked quite a bit about Passover and what that meant and how it even ties into communion and ties into so many different things, and how it's all about moving from slavery and death and sin into freedom and healing and life. And it's all about being under the blood. You're either in that place, you're under that doorway with his blood on it, or you're not. It's a very simple thing. You can't be saved by knowing someone who's saved. It just doesn't work that way. I wanted to take just a minute, I'll do it in a second. We're actually going to hit 2 feasts today. The spring feast, there are 4. Passover, we already hit. We're going to talk about the Feast of Unleavened Bread today and the Feast of Firstfruits today. Now, what a lot of people don't realize is all 3 of these feasts really kind of jam all together. Passover happens on the 14th day of the first month of the Hebrew year, every year. And Easter is actually figured mostly off of how Passover is figured. It's a lunar, solar calendar kind of mix-up, complicated thing, but that's how Passover falls. Now, when Passover begins, from that time for 7 days on, the Jews eat only unleavened bread. And the Sabbath immediately following the Passover night is called Firstfruits. So you have Passover here, and then unleavened bread is kind of here, and then firstfruits is kind of in here, in the middle. All 3 of them are going on basically at the same time. In fact, once Passover started, you couldn't touch leaven. You couldn't have leaven in your house, in your community, in the land really at all. So you had to prepare and be getting rid of leaven before Passover even began. So unleavened bread really it really covers all of these things. And what is unleavened bread? What is that whole feast really about? It's about getting the sin out. And you remember, it's about taking every bit of that sin and putting it on that wooden cross and wrapping it in a grave cloth and putting it in the fire. Because when you burn things, you can't dig them back out of the trash. They're gone. They've turned into ash and they're gone. And that's how he intends your life to look. All that you are and all that you can't be and all the sin and filth and shame and guilt, he wants to sweep onto the cross, wrap it in a grave cloth, stick it in the fire, and kiss it goodbye. That's what he intends. That's what unleavened bread is. But there's some really key things about unleavened bread that we need to look at. When your life comes to a place where you realize that there are things you can't change and things you are liable for, and that sin has a hold on you, and that death owns you because you can't pay for yourself, and the answer comes. It's meant to be a process where you run toward him in a hurry. It's not really a mess around, I kind of believe that, yeah, that sounds good. I want him to wash my sins away and go to heaven. We'll fix some of this stuff another time. It's just not the way the picture is. What's really interesting is I'm going to put a little plug in here for something on Netflix that I watched recently called Patterns of Evidence, the Exodus. and it's put together in part with the help of Answers in Genesis. The amazing thing this video actually looks at is there evidence in Egypt of an exodus? And for a lot of Egyptologists, they will say, well, there's really no evidence. But part of the reason is because the Exodus is believed to have happened around 975 to 1200 BC, and there's no evidence there. But what's interesting is that there's massive evidence in Goshen, which is where the Jews are said to have lived, of a Semitic people, Jewish. You've heard the term anti-Semitism, right? Semites are Jews. Anyone know where the word Semite comes from? Shem. Anybody know who Shem was? Noah's son. So the world recognizes Jews as Semites or descendants of Shem. You know, the guy that never existed. Yeah, because Noah's a fairy tale. But the whole world calls them Semites, right? They're descendants of Shem. That's where they get the name Semites and where we get the term anti-Semite or anti-Semitic or Semitic. So what happens is they excavate this land where there are hundreds of thousands of Semites living in this valley, and they can tell by digging things up that this settlement formed and grew very, very, very quickly. Now, there's some amazing facts, and I could spend the rest of the day telling you about how I'm pretty sure that they found Joseph's burial site. And one of the crazy things about it is there's no bones in it. Joseph made his descendants promise that when they left Egypt, because he knew they would, that they would take his bones. People say, oh, grave robbers. Grave robbers don't take bones because they're not worth anything. Just so happens that this tomb is a pyramid in shape. And there's a statue inside of a man with Semitic features wearing a coat that's striped. I'm going to stop there. Loaded with information. Now, what they can tell you is, inside this place, they can tell you this people suddenly left. And they all left. They can tell you other details about the story of the history of the Jews in Egypt that matches the history. Even down to the fact that there are shallow, quickly done, quickly buried graves right before they left. You know what that means? Not everybody was inside the night the death angel passed over. Jews died. Because you can't get saved by association. You have to be under the blood. Okay? If you have Netflix, look for this. It is awesome. It's awesome. So Unleavened Bread was about a people that had cried out to God, a people that wanted something changed in their lives. You have things you want changed in your lives? Are there things you're a slave of? Are there places that are hopeless? You want something new. This people wanted something new, and they cried out to God, and God answered them. And when he did, they left. They answered him, and they left the place they said they wanted to leave. One really important thing that I want to touch on here that I don't think we can pass over, no pun intended, we can't pass over this piece because it's extremely important. There are things we'd like to leave in our lives. But when the answer appears in our life and says, I want to own it all, sweep your sin onto me and let me burn it, we say, I'm a slave, it's rough, but maybe I should stay. We know they complained and talked about going back. I'm betting there were a few that didn't go. When the answer comes, are you willing to take that answer? Because he is the answer. These people left everything they had. Now, I'm sure there's more than one person in this room who would like to have a different job than they do. I'm not one of them. Okay? But here's the question. If you'd like a different job than you have, would you like it enough to leave if some guy you didn't really know very well and did some quirky stuff said, I'm going to take you to a greater place, it'll be better income, better hours, more time with your family. Well, where is it? Not really sure. What am I going to do? I don't know. What are you going to eat? What are we going to eat tomorrow? I don't know. How am I going to pay my bills next month? I don't know, but we got to leave tomorrow. You got to quit tomorrow. I don't care how much you hate your job. I don't think very many people will be signing up. Because we like security, we like familiar, we like control. And although we hate things about who we are and the sin we can't defeat, there are things about it that we like enough to hold on to it, right? That's what Israel faced. That's why unleavened bread, the reason it was unleavened is because they couldn't stick around long enough to raise the dough, to let the yeast raise the dough to bake it. They were in a hurry. We got to leave now. We're leaving now. That's what unleavened bread is. That's another piece of the picture. He says, I'm here to save you. Are you ready? Are you coming with me? Or are you going to sit back in the leaven lump and wish but not really wish to move out of it? The other feast is Firstfruits. Now, this is an amazing one. There's some things that just aren't obvious right at the onset of the Feast of Firstfruits. One of them is that this is barley. There's a couple of grains that they raise in the area. And in the Bible, actually, I noticed when I was first looking at these things that it says when Jesus and his disciples were walking through a field and they were picking corn and eating it. And I thought, corn? I never imagined them walking through a cornfield. Well, in my research, I realized something. All maize is corn, but not all corn is maize. Barley, the nuggets on barley is considered corn. It's basically a grain. All different grains can be called corn. So when you're reading in the Old Testament, it doesn't actually mean like corn on the cob. It means grain. Okay? Just to let you in on a piece of information I'm sure will change your world. So this was the barley harvest. Now there's some unique things about barley. Barley is the hardiest probably of the grains that grew there. Barley had to survive the winter. It was planted in the winter. It endured the harshest of all of the weather. And what it represents is a Savior who came, not at a great time in history, endured the harshest of seasons, and became the first fruit, literally the guarantor, the one who guarantees that the rest of the harvest will come in. Did you know that when the barley harvest came into this season, they would go out and there was a specific field that the priest would tend to make sure nothing happened to it. It didn't become unclean. The field stayed perfectly pure. They would take a bunch of sheaves of grain off of this field, and then they would examine specific ones to pick out the best one. Then they would take this perfect sheaf and they would bring it in and lift it up like he was on the cross and wave it before the Lord. And this sheaf actually made the rest of that field and the rest of every field for the harvest clean or kosher. So that first sheaf coming in, which he was, made all the rest clean. And it was literally considered a guarantee that the rest of the harvest would be realized, would be brought in and seen. So he is the first fruit. When he came from the grave, he is the firstborn of many where death is conquered. He's born out of it. Do you know what day he came out of the grave on? Firstfruits. He came out of the ground on that day. And here's the crazy thing. You know how the priests would watch over this field and they would make sure that nobody went in the field that was unclean, no dead body touched the field, all these certain things did not happen to the field so that all the grain in that field would remain clean and it would all be worthy, and then it would, in the sequence, bless and make worthy all the other crops? Do you remember on the morning Jesus rose from the grave and he appeared to Mary and she says, Lord, she recognizes him. What does he say to her? Don't touch me. Why do you think he said that? I've wondered about this up until this past week. Mary was one of the ones who helped to anoint his body and put him in the grave, right? She was unclean. She had touched a dead body. She was unclean. Amazingly, Nicodemus, who a year maybe earlier would only come to Jesus at night for fear of the other Pharisees knowing he was talking to Jesus, volunteers to take him off the cross with Joseph of Arimathea, making him a Pharisee unclean during Passover. That's huge. I mean, he took all of the cultural stigma and just threw it to the wind and showed where his heart was. So that's probably why Jesus said, don't touch me. I haven't been back to my Father yet. Well, that first sheaf, if you took that first sheaf, this is the one, it's the one that's chosen, and there's a dead donkey, cross it out, it's not clean anymore. Doesn't work. He literally had to remain clean and be that wave offering, presented as the first of the harvest to his Father. And her touching him would have potentially made him unclean. It's crazy. It's that particular, right? Most assuredly, I say to you, he who hears my word and believes in him who sent me has everlasting life and shall not come into judgment, but has passed from death into life. Remember, we said that's what Passover is. It's a moving from death to life. It's a moving from slavery to freedom. That's why they recline at the table. That's why they celebrate. They were freed from bondage. When we realize who he is, what he's calling us to do, that it's not this casual, maybe I'll move away from sin. It is a, let's be in a hurry about this. Let's sweep it all away. Not a day. How about 7? It's like a number of the Lord, like completeness. Like every day of the week. Not just Sunday. How about every day? Let's let him sweep this out of our lives. And load it on him and throw it in the fire. You remember the unleavened bread, the matzah, they would dip it in the bitter herbs and in the mixture that was like mortar, like loading all of that onto him. Remember that? He took our transgressions, all of our wounds, our weights, our pains. That's another picture. Look at one more. We talked about this verse last week. Galatians 2:20 says, I have been crucified with Christ. What does that mean? What does that even mean? Here's what I think it means. What did he do? He took his own will and what he would have wanted in the humanness that he experienced, and expressed, Lord, if there's another way. But he took what he wanted and he set it over here, and he chose what his Father wanted for the glory of his Father and for the salvation of mankind. I think that's what crucified with Christ means. It means that what I want, what I dream, what I think gets put up against him, and where it's found different, I lay me over here and I walk his path for his glory and for the salvation of mankind. Amen? It is no longer I who live, but Christ who lives in me. And the life I now live in the flesh, I live by faith in the Son of God who loved me and gave himself for me.
I hope this message was insightful and informative to you. I want you to know that I hope, even more than you having a great week, I hope that you have a week where your life is changed and drawn to him.